mind you, that government was always telling that we are doing this for your own safety. Okay, we are protecting you because there's so many bad things. We are always that Germany can invade us again, the Western Europe, Americans. I can tell you, every day in school we were practicing, maybe not every day, but once a week, practicing how do we behave during invasion of United States on Poland, right? And how it was propaganda to almost like George Orwell 1984. And people today read this and think that's fiction, but I can tell you, I lived through this, and it's amazing how it's possible to introduce that level of oppression, that level of censorship on any country at any time, right? And even the pieces in the Orwell 1984 when the history was changed. This is exactly what I lived through. The history was changed. The history of after Second World War.
Americans are capable of achieving extraordinary things when they have the freedom and opportunity to do so. This is American Potential. And here's your host, Jeff Crank.
Thanks for joining us on American Potential. Appreciate you being with us. Another great story of someone who wasn't born in the United States coming here. Talks about the greatness of America. And we're going to start today's episode with a quote from John Gardner, who said, "History never looks like history when you're living through it." Now, this quote is very relatable with today's guest, who, along with his family, lived through historical events in his country, coming from a family that was impacted by both Nazis and the Soviet Union during World War II. His parents saw what each side did, and through sharing their lived experience, it helped shape his thinking, even while growing up under the shadow of communism. Now, despite state-controlled propaganda, he was still aware of the truth from what his family shared with him and being able to have access to illegal material. In school, there were only a handful of students that thought the same way as he did, but they couldn't discuss it due to the threat of being punished. When he attended college, the country was under communist rule, but through the Solidarity movement, there was a change in government, and by the time he graduated, his country had become free. He planned on staying in his home country, but life had a different path for our guest. I want to welcome Ted Trzeniowski to the podcast. Ted, thanks for being with us.
Hello, Jeff. Thank you for having me, and I'm very happy that I can share some of my stories for your audience, so they can see from my perspective a couple, and from my angle, a couple things that maybe open their eyes as well.
Yeah, we start from that premise that most of the people listening to this podcast were probably born in America and kind of take it for granted what it was like. I mean, certainly very few people probably who listen to this podcast comparatively grew up under communism, and you did. And so before we get into that, share your family's story a little bit, going back, talking about, World War II and even all of that.
Yeah, sure, Jeff. So I come from that generation, that first generation, born and raised after Second World War. So both of my parents lived through war, and unfortunately, they suffer greatly of family losses and material losses during war. So frankly, in my childhood, in early 70s, that Second World War, it was still very, very recent memories. And there is no occasion that we would gather as a family that there would be that subject or topic of the Second World War would not surface somehow. So my dad was only 6 years old when Soviets invaded Poland in 1939. And he was, with the entire family, he was deported to Siberia in February 1940 as a prisoner of war, spent there 6 years, mind you, child, 6 years old, and his family, half of which was killed by Soviets. My grandfather was killed by Soviets as well. And he came back to Poland when he was 12. So you can imagine that how that the hunger and seeing the devastating losses of the family for him as a child, how much impact that was. And of course, he brought that with him. And when I was raised, however, he was a very strong patriot, fighting for freedom entire life and fighting against that what was socialism, communism, and of course oppression of the government entire life. My mom, however, on the other side, was affected by Nazis, like you said in your introduction. She was born in 1941 and during the Nazis' occupation of Poland, and her dad was civilian. And in 1943, he was shot by German officer in one of the cities as the penalty for militia in that region affecting the German soldiers. So she was he held her in his arms when he was selected as a civilian and basically was killed right there. So this was both sides that, of course, appreciation of peace, but also the very, very memories of what war brings to the if it's fought in your country. And as you know, Poland, unfortunately, geopolitical situation between Russia and Germany, 1,000 years history was unfortunately was always wars on our territory, and that, of course, Second World War was as well fought right there.
That's as you know, we are products of our own story, right? We're products of the background that we all grow up with. Tell us a little bit. I mean, how did that, both your mother and your father and their experiences as kids, how did that affect, I guess, their life as parents, and how did that affect the way that they raised you? Did you see the effects of that on you?
Yeah, I can tell you it's amazing how much they try to shelter us, me and my sister, from what our grandmothers telling the stories. They were still trying to somehow provide the best household, and as you can imagine, was not easy in socialism. But the best household and peace to us, so we could be raised in somehow under umbrella of their protection. And so the stories were, we were always told the stories. My dad even wrote part of one of the chapters in the book about Siberia and how he saw this whole whole tragedy via child eyes. But it was always good to memorize, to remember those stories. However, we were always raised to respect other opinions and other point of views, as long as you're not affecting you negatively or So again, I give you an example. My dad was always as much as he suffered from Soviets and communism, he was always telling us never hate Russian people. You meet people, never hate them because what our family suffered from. Always respect them because that in so many cases they are not guilty of what has happened. The system and the government but not the people that you meet. So we were raised with this. I can tell you, not much hate to the nation that was causing those tragedies to our country, our families. And I can tell you, I'm so happy and I'm so grateful for my parents that they raised me in that absolutely way of not having hate in heart, other than hate to the system, hate to the dictatorship, and frankly, I have to say, and Marxism and Nazism as well. And any indication that any of these systems that sometimes are finding attractive by today's societies, especially that socialism and Marxism, I can tell you that I'll fight entire life to protect this country now, and any country actually, from repeating the same mistake that so many countries and so many governments decided that to pursue.
Well, and we need We need people like you, Ted, to remind us of that, because I do think that we, again, take it for granted so often. Let's talk about what it was like growing up in Poland for you. What was it like growing up really under communism?
So I can tell you, it's people's perception is that, that countries, the Eastern Bloc, that people, they lived their own fate, if you will. They decided that they will live in communism. There's nothing far away from that. Okay, this was oppression. This was a system introduced by very tiny minority and government on the majority of the people who wanted to have nothing to do with socialism and Marxism. And I can tell you, it was very, very interesting how many people in Poland were too afraid to fight, too afraid to speak, too afraid to because they personally were maybe less affected than others, right? So if you had the job and the job paid you minimum wage and you were not prosecuted per se by the government, people were saying, well, this is under this massive propaganda of media and government, which own all the media and pretty much every publications, or it was basically in government hands. How people really believe that, this is maybe the way the life should be, and mind you that this is after Second World War, where generations of people suffered greatly, and having that peace, they were thinking that this is probably something that is possible to live. And then it was a group of people who were saying, no, this doesn't need to be that way. But again, that small group of people were always against, mind you, media, government, prosecution, and that was the price they paid in many cases. So I can tell you, you ask how was growing. If you were a person who were accepting this, you could actually have okay life, okay, very minimalistic, but you could actually live on the crumbs from the table of government, very rich oligarchs. If you have freedom in your heart, if you wanted to have to explore the world and the systems and justice and democracy, then this was a prison. Okay, so for me, this was a prison. This was a prison that we were always watched by government. We were censored by government. We were deprived of basic necessity by government, and that you basically are choked, right? Because you in very early stages, if you see as a young child that you cannot speak your mind, that you cannot read books that you would like to, that the government who owns all the TV and all the media and all the publications basically is feeding you the stories that are not true. And how do you know they're not true? Because you have access, very limited, but access to some of the, like you said, illegal materials, illegal books published in the Western Europe and US. And very important piece was we had this Radio Free Europe that was sponsored by US and was actually broadcasting from Western Germany. That actually you could actually get some of the opposition views and artists and free press that actually have showing how different the world is versus to what you are being fed in socialism. So, but again, remind you that government was always telling that we are doing this for your own safety. Okay, we are protecting you because there's so many bad things. We are always that Germany can invade us again. The Western Europe, Americans. I can tell you, every day in school we were practicing, maybe not every day, but once a week, practicing how do we behave during invasion of United States on Poland, right? And how it was propaganda to almost like George Orwell 1984. And people today read this and think that's fiction, but I can tell you, I lived through this, and it's amazing how it's possible to introduce that level of oppression, that level of censorship on any country at any time, right?
Yeah.
And even the pieces in the Orwell 1984, when the history was changed, this is exactly what I lived through. The history was changed. The history of after Second World War was not what you could read in books, which were owned by government, what you were studying in school, which was indoctrinated by government, what your media and all the TV was showing was all designed to twist the history to the level that would be beneficial for government and not the truth of what really happened to the world.
Yeah. Ted, you say that they told you, the government basically said, we're doing this to protect you. Does that strike you? I mean, there are people who say that today in the United States.
Yeah,
the government is doing all these things to protect you.
I can tell you that parable is too real. Okay, it's too real, and I can tell you every time when you during it was actually very well emphasized during the pandemic, where basically everything that government was doing was for your own safety. And I can tell you, even in US, you were always surprised how many people are falling into this without trying to get to the depth of understanding of, is this the real truth? Is this the real story? Should I really go and investigate? And I can tell you, you see that the access to the free media in the United States is getting more and more controlled. And more, what we are seeing now, I can tell you, coming from Poland, because we've seen what government can do and how government can control the information, we are super skeptical, even in free democracy and in the United States. Why? Because we know it's possible. We know everything can be twisted. So we are doing so much more research. We, as when I say the majority of immigrants, we are doing our own research before we take for granted what our governor or our government, doesn't matter which left or right side, we always want to know, because I believe that I have the same ability to understand the information, study information, and I can make my own conclusion, my own decision, not that somebody will tell me that this is for my safety, this is for my benefit. I would like to really check that fact check,
Right. When you say you were growing up, there were many kids your age, others who I guess you would almost say succumbed to this and just allowed it to happen and accepted it because it was easier to accept it and get a little bit of a living, scrabbled out of that kind of a life by accepting what the government was doing. What goes on in someone's mind? I mean, first of all, what percentage of the people just kind of accepted it versus had, as you said, had freedom in their hearts and didn't accept it? What percentage of people?
So I can tell you, it's a very, listen, the propaganda that you see somewhat here in the United States, but propaganda in the government who owns everything, owns all the media, own press, all the propaganda is extremely strong tool. Okay. And if you have no desire to search the truth, it's very easy to fall for this, right? And I give you an example of propaganda. Like, we have no access to see what the Western Europe life is like, right? We knew that, somebody had some family, but letters were controlled. The TV, the phones were very difficult to get. My family was waiting for the phone, for actually hardline phone, for probably 10 years in line to actually be able to have a phone. And then phones, were extremely expensive, so you couldn't even call the family abroad. But propaganda was basically, give you an example, that how we were showing, how they were showing America. And they was showing Central Park in New York City in winter, and they were showing homeless people in Central Park saying, this is America. You think capitalism is good, but here is, from one side of Fifth Avenue, you see the beautiful homes, and the camera shot was showing those chandeliers and a across of that street on the other side, you see homeless people who are dying every day in America's streets. And they were saying that very small percentage of people who are well-to-do versus majority of people living in poverty. And you have zero opportunity to check the facts, right? So I give you an example. As a kid in grade school, I remember there was a group of government sponsored agencies who were collecting sleeping bags to be sent for homeless people in America. And they were saying there's such a need because there's no shelters and people believe this. People in Poland were collecting that, the warm clothing, but there was zero information that, how really many areas or how many shelters are available, or this is extreme small percentage of people who suffer that homelessness versus what propaganda twisted this. So that is something that I can tell you, a government with a proper and with a very, very wealthy, if you will, propaganda machine can actually do. So you ask for the people simply didn't know. People whose parents were not educated, and mind you that during Second World War, both Nazis and Soviets, the number one target was people with higher education. It was intelligence for that reason, because they believe if they take the top layer of the society, most of the people will be easy to control. So there was so parents who were not educated, parents who did not know any better, who were also, mind you, they were scared of their safety, because that was very everyday occurrence. If you were caught with reading illegal books, if you were caught even listening the radio, the free radio Europe, there were consequences, and consequences were you were losing the job, you will go to prison, you cannot go to college, and so people were scared. People were thinking, okay, maybe there is no way we can overturn this, so it's probably better not to kind of read about the illegal materials. It's better live that minimalistic life than go and start the riots. That did not stop that smaller group of people who were very brave, right? And if you read the Polish history, it was sequence of every half a decade of every decade we had tried to uprising. 1956, 1968, 1970, 1976, 1980 were group, usually workers and college students. They were trying to. Nobody was talking to overturn the government. They were trying to ask for the basic freedom, necessities. They were asking we would like to travel the world. We would like to be able to read the books we like. We would like to have food in our household. We would like to have a toilet paper, which was unfortunately one of those materials never available. And I'm not exaggerating, right? This is the socialism life 101, how to get those necessities. And the workers who work really hard were trying to say, well, we work so hard, why we cannot buy anything in this country? Why this country of 40 million people is so poor? Where is this wealth going? And then, of course, that was immediately portrayed as a fight against socialism, and they were the leaders of this opposition were thrown to jail. Some of them spent decades in jail. Some of them disappeared, and it was very, very again typical to socialists in government. Basically, take the leaders out, and it was never he was assassinated. It was basically he was found dead because he overused alcohol, or he drowned. Or it was every month we've heard stories like this, and it doesn't matter if this was priests who were, and I have to emphasize the Catholic Church, how strong hiding spot for opposition that was during that period of time. But priests were killed as well, who were freedom fighters, or who were actually trying to support those opposition leaders. So it was tough. to say, if you wanted to bring freedom, it was a tough to be on that side.
Yeah. You talked about several things that I think most Americans would not understand. You talked about your family having to wait a decade to get a phone, a landline phone, because the government provided that to citizens and they chose who got them and who didn't. I mean, that's just something completely foreign to anyone who grew up in the United States, trying to see that. But you talked about the shortages and, whether it's toilet paper or getting thrown in prison because you read the wrong book. These are things that just, people who, anyone who's 20, 25, 30 years old today in the United States of America and has lived here their whole life, that's a fairy tale to them because they wouldn't even believe that this stuff happens in another country. Your thoughts on that?
Yeah, absolutely, Jeff. This is, so I lived through this time of having rations. You could buy 1 kilogram of meat per month, or you can want a piece of chocolate for the child, 100 grams per month. And you had those rations. You had those little blocks of coupons, if you will. And even though you had it, it was not available. So there were lines in store. Doesn't matter what I remember as a child, the lines in stores were so long. And if you see that a store that was completely empty, there was nothing on the shelves, but the line was forming. That means that somebody already had the hint that something will be available. Doesn't matter what. It could be butter, could be milk, could be bread. So mom and dad would say, go and stay in line, because it doesn't matter what they bring, you need it, right? We need it. So I can tell you when I came to America in 1994, mind you, this was already post change from socialism to free market. But again, going to the stores and seeing, shelves and stores full of, it's not just, you go and see butter. You have 10 different kinds, right? You go and this was, I can tell you that for the kid from, my wife came as a 60 years old. It was 1991. And she didn't see much of that abundance of everything in because of the free market chain. So for her, it was shock going to the stores of everything available, right? And I can tell you when I came to, so you said that young people do not appreciate. This was for us, immigrants, was the most amazing, like how young people our age did not see how great opportunities they have, right? So we came to this country with nothing, right? We see this country as the best opportunity. And I had those discussions with people when I came and lived in Middlesex County in New Jersey. My age people who were saying, this is very difficult. Can I find job? College is expensive. And I was like, you are born in America. You are better than 99% of the world population. And you have nothing to complain. Okay. Yes, you have to work hard. Yes, you have to try. Yes, if you fail, you have to stand up and do it. But you are already in that privileged position. Doesn't matter where you come from. Doesn't matter who your friends are. You can achieve to whatever. And this was for kids who were talking to me. They were like, what do you mean? And I was sharing that, how about living with no food? How about living life with, 4 people in 1-bedroom apartment? That was a normal thing, right? How about living that, that government tells you everything? That is tough, right? Being here and saying, oh yeah, I have no future. I said, no, this is just up to you. You can make that happen. And it was, I can tell you, it's just, for us, it was always that people who were complaining only for one reason, because they simply had no idea what difficulty in life could be if you are not born in the United States.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I go back to like the 1990s when I came, but I can tell you, last year, I was traveling from Poland in business, from Poland to United States, and I met 2 guys from Detroit area, in their like late 20s, who went for a month to Georgia, post-Soviet Republic, Georgia. and they spent a month vacationing. And I met them at the airport, and they actually said something, because that Georgia, post-Soviet about, is still probably in the still very poor country, still kind of almost like a socialist government, or villages and cities are extremely in poverty. They told me something like, this is exactly what I was preaching to the young people. They were saying that they had no idea. They grew up here. They have blue collar work. They were like, okay, life is, kind of so-so. They went for this trip and they came back different people. They were saying they had no idea how difficult life can be, and how much they appreciate, of being born Americans, right? And I can tell you this, if you ask me, if I have every child in high school should be at least even somewhat exposed to see the rest of the world, how great they have, how great we have here in America. And because that is actually, that experience is something that, they would realize, and they would say, yeah, we, shouldn't complain. We have a great country. Yeah.
And by the way, when you came to the United States, you had a basketball nickname. What was your basketball nickname?
Yeah, so I can tell you, before I got my green card, and I can tell you, I went through all this legal immigration process, which was so lengthy and so tedious. And I can tell you, probably one day I'll write the book, how difficult it was to become an American citizen in the legal way, but I did this process. But so before I got the paper that I can work, my wife was in college here, and I said, okay, what I'm going to do. I played some basketball back in old country. So I was going to the park in the small town, Carteret, in New Jersey, and I started playing basketball with with people who were there in the middle of the day, also had nothing better to do. And I was the only white kid on the group, because this was predominantly African American players, pickup game, and this is the 1994 in prime of Chicago Bulls, which I love that NBA team growing up in Poland, and there was a Yugoslavian player, Tony Kukoc. So I was kind of similar, black hair, tall. Had good shot, so they call me Tony. And because of they were like, yeah, you move like him, you play like him. But I got to gain respect of this team. I made a lot of friends on that team. I was never threatened. I had actually a great time. But we had a couple of situations with my wife walking evening in this Carteret where, I was the group of kids surrounded us, and they called me, hey, Tony, what's going on? My wife didn't know anything about the Tony Kukoc story. So she was like, why are they calling you Tony? I was like, I explained to you. It's fine. It's all fine. I know them. Other good people, right? So, yeah, but this was my first discussions about, guys, you think you have bad here? It's not bad.
Right.
This is a great country. Just you stop complaining, start working, right? You cannot have, cannot have that desire to have everything that other people have except their jobs, right? So roll the sleeve, go to college, roll the sleeve, go and work hard. Otherwise, you'll be complaining here for another 20 years, or so.
Right. Right. Now, you talked a little bit about how this all, the change in Poland came about. I remember it well. In fact, I met Lech Walesa when he came to the United States and delivered a joint address in front of a joint session of Congress. And but you talked about the Catholic Church being involved there and being stalwarts, kind of against communism and being an ally there. But talk about the Solidarity movement and what effects did that have on Poland and the people of Poland?
Yeah. So I can tell you this Solidarity, when it started, my dad joined it. We were all, this was I can tell you, I always say that there were three people who made that, maybe four, who made that transformation, peaceful transformation from socialism to free market possible. It was Lech Walesa, John Paul II, Ronald Reagan, and for somewhat Gorbachev, who allowed that because of the economy was falling. But I can tell you, Poland, when John Paul II was, and mind you, Poland is 95% Catholic nation, at least back in the day was, and John Paul II becoming Pope, coming to Poland in 1978, started that another strong movement when millions and millions of people came to the mass, and when his message was that you are free people, and the Holy Spirit can come and change this world, this country. And people start believing because they see that there was a small group of, and I can tell you, socialists hated that election of that Pope. This was the worst nightmare for Soviet bloc, that Eastern European priest becomes Pope and the leader of the Catholic Church in the world. And
John Paul was in fact Polish, right?
Yes,
he was the first non-Italian.
Yes, he was the
Pope.
first non-Italian with a very strong message that it doesn't need to be that way, right? So I can tell you that triggered that solidarity, Lech Walesa movement, and people were seeing that now it's time to join this. Now it's time because it's millions, we could see the Cold War was in the peak. You could see the Soviets are becoming weaker and weaker. Nobody believed that it's possible. Nobody believed that it's possible to turn, to the democracy, turn to the democratic election. But at least we thought we can fight for some additional rights, maybe in slight movements of into the right direction. But it went, because of the Reagan and Americans supporting us and that freedom. John Paul II was strong, spiritual leader for the group. People came to the point that we're not afraid anymore. And because they realized there's so many of those people who lived in this again, minimalistic world of, hey, give me a little bit and I'll be satisfied. Now they realize that they can have so much more, that they can have freedom, they can have democracy, they can actually be free people. And you could not stop. They tried, they introduced martial law in 1981. I lived through this. Tanks on the streets of the cities, Soviet troops in every city where I grew up. There were next town there was Soviet garrison of a battalion of Soviet soldiers, but you could not stop this. They tried, but again, the falling economy, the spiritual leader of John Paul II, and then strong president in America who said, "Not on my watch." Okay, and Gorbachev finally allowed that, the Soviet republics and Eastern Bloc to become free. So again, 1989 was the best year of my youth when we had that semi-free election where we were able to bring some of the opposition leaders into the parliament and eventually take over the government, which was that beginning of the free Poland just started.
So you would essentially give credit to Ronald Reagan, Pope John Paul II, to some degree, Mikhail Gorbachev for allowing it to happen, and to Lech Walesa and the leader of that solidarity movement.
Yeah. This is absolutely. This is of course the geopolitical situation at that time. But it wouldn't be for those leaders, and it wouldn't be for the strong leadership in the U.S. that actually did not blink in this, whole Cold War. When came to the position of no, I support those Polish people. You cannot, and sanctions that they were introduced after martial law was introduced on Polish people. That was a very, very impactful, and I will be. Right. Forever grateful to Ronald Reagan. And I can tell you, any opportunity I have, I emphasize that, because it's probably by many areas, many people forgotten that how critical, important that was.
Yeah. Yeah, it was. And, you know, as you mentioned, John Paul II, and just the moment in history that he became, you know, the first non-Italian Pope came from Poland. And he was a staunch anti-communist. I mean, he really knew that communism crushed the human spirit. And that was something that was antithetical to Catholicism and to Christianity in his mind.
Yeah,
So,
you're
yeah.
absolutely right. If you look at this, you know, what Marxists were always trying to do is the same pattern. Okay, they started with religion is bad, right? Why? Because religion provides you that moral compass, and I don't care what religion, right? There is a
Right.
certain moral compass that young people understand what's right, what's wrong, right? So take the people out of churches and synagogues and temples, right? Then destroy the family. Why? Because if it's strong family, you know, then parents will lead the kids, not the government, not the schools indoctrination, and no, parents, right? So if you destroy family, if you destroy faith, if you destroy family, okay, that the subjects are much easier to mold into the government controlled subject, right? That is, you know, and that indoctrination I witness in Soviet bloc and socialism. That indoctrination, you probably heard many stories from people coming from Cuba or on Venezuela or other other countries where socialism was tried. It's the same pattern, right? And it starts very early. Ted Cruz has a great story in his book how his grandparents and his parents witnessed that in the very early education in Cuba. We did the same thing. We've seen it. And I can tell you that same pattern is always with people who believe that socialism is possible. You have to start from schools. You have to destroy the family. If you accomplish that, then you can form those young individuals, because, you know, kids have good hearts usually, and they want to share. They believe that, you know, everybody should be equal. Everybody should share with the wealth they have. They do not understand concept of, well, yeah, you have to work hard in order to get to the point that you can share with somebody, right? And the person who receives needs to understand that you cannot have that for free. You have to work as well in order to have that, you know, the part of that, you know, of the goodness. So I can tell you, this is that trap that, you know, that you know, again, the destroying the faith, destroying the family, destroying it, and indoctrination in early school. That is a pattern that we witness in social, and frankly, the pattern that we are seeing in this great country now. Right? Yeah. There's a group of people who, you know, who are attempting to do exactly the same. They don't even hide anymore, right? They don't even hide. There are professors at universities who are claiming they're Marxists. They would love to have that. They would love to have this concept of sharing everything. They want everything what you have except your job, right? And that's what it is, right? You think about it in America 50, 60 years ago, where was you work hard, you will achieve whatever you want. You will achieve more than what your parents have. Now is that ethos is gone. We don't say work hard, right? You say, hey, you know, give it to me, right? We are entitled to have that, and we lost that, and we lost that piece of no. You have to work hard in order to benefit from this great country,
right?
For free, there's nothing for free. Okay, that means you have to take from somebody to give to somebody else, and that concept never worked.
Right. Well, now you had to live through some of this, or you endured much of it when you were young, but Poland became free. And why did you decide to come to the United States? What drew you to come to America?
Yeah, that's the toughest question to answer. It was love. It was love. My wife now, we are together. We will celebrate 30th anniversary 4 kids later. She was a young girl, and I was doing PhD in Poland, and she was in college here, and we had to make a decision where to live together. And and I decided that, you know what, I will follow my heart, even though, I finally had that Poland, free country that my generations of my parents and grandparents were fighting for. Finally, I had that on the available, and I could live this great change from oppression to from prison to free democracy. And unfortunately, the heart take over my mind, and I follow the love. The rest is a love story. Never regret it. But I can tell you, when I came here, I truly believe that this is, the best country in the world, that we owe this to people who fought for this. We should be grateful forever for those people who provided to us this democracy, this country, the freedom that we all can benefit from and all can enjoy. And for that reason, I joined very early in my career. I joined defense industry because I believe that this is the small token of appreciation, me working on the parts and systems that can help our warfighters to be successful and to be better than anybody that they're facing. That because again, I one thing that, yes, in the beginning of this discussion, I said everybody should be, grateful for being born in the best country in the world. Second thing that everybody should respect and be, appreciate what those who fought for us, who provided this to us, did, and remember that forever. And that's not enough in this country. I can tell you, this is another area that I try to do the best I can to support the veterans, support the people who, providing this security blanket for me that I can have the great living, me and my family.
Yeah. Did your parents live to see a free Poland?
Yes. My parents live see the Poland, and I can tell you, regardless of because they were already older, they were already they already retired, but they still were grateful for what was achieved, and I can tell you that there's one phenomenon of being free country is many people who fought for this freedom, people who believe that being free, and then they have some remorse. They were some regrets of, well, because, in the free market, what's happening is people who are working hard, people who are trying more, they immediately being elevated into the upper class, right? And people who do not have the desire to work hard, people who do not have the skills or the attributes, they are falling behind. And then, so there is a group of people who were saying, well, at least in this socialism, it was a group of oligarchs who have everything, but 90% of society or more than that was living in the same poverty roughly, and roughly were the same standard of living. Doesn't matter if you were a physician or professor at school or a worker in the company, life was almost the same. And now in the free market, now you see that people who are working hard, people who are they are being elevated, and there's a group of people falling behind. And I can tell you, there was a group of people who were saying, yeah, but we don't like this change because we are almost I never traveled in the past. I never read the books in the past, so I don't care about this now. I can read the books. I never read the books anyway. I don't travel. I don't. So almost like following government at the time gave me something. Here now I have to fight for everything on my own, medical, insurance, and all. So there was a group of people who were, almost like thinking that this was better life in socialism. And I can tell you, this was the dark side of winning in the free democracy, because we never thought there would be people who would be, missing that communism. And my parents who lived through this, they were always said, every day coming to people who were hearing the stories from, they were fighting like, are you nuts? Don't you see what we have? Don't you see democracy? Don't you can change this. You can go and do whatever you want. Your kids can do. You can, but again, this was this was the bitter side of, hey, we fought for this freedom, And now we have this group of people who are missing that socialism.
Yeah. So, and we just got about a minute or so here, but I just thought I'd ask this final question. This may be the toughest question I've asked you, but because I've been searching for this answer myself and I haven't been able to figure it out. There are some people who you talked about have freedom in their hearts. They have liberty in their hearts and they understand it. There are other people who decide, well, it's okay. I'm comfortable with government giving me what they're going to give me. I'm not one of those people. I want everything I choose. I have that liberty and freedom inside of me. Obviously, you have that inside of you too, Ted. What's the difference? What makes people have that desire for liberty and freedom inside them, in your mind?
It's a tough question. I can tell you it's probably some is of the natural born that you have that, think about people who became explorers, who became not for the fame, but became explorers, became adventurous, trying to discover what the boundaries of the world, right? Same with freedom. If you are born, there is some attributes, but also there's, a very personal how you are raised, who are you surrounded, what are your friends, what are your people who surround you. Because it's very easy to fall into this, what you just said. It's okay. It doesn't affect me. Yeah, government tells me this, but probably they are right because they read more books than I do. They probably do the study I don't have access to. So you fall into this, almost like opportunistic conformism that you're saying, well, it's okay. It's okay to live that life because I don't need to make my own decisions. Government will do it for me. I don't need to, go against the mainstream because then people will think that I'm strange, right? I mean, think about this. I mean, kids in college, they're afraid to speak. They're afraid to speak their mind because they will be immediately labeled in today's world. There is no debate anymore, right? And again, there's some small group who have that spirit, who have that freedom. But again, it's very dangerous. If we kill debate, if we kill this, the opportunity to speak your mind, and in colleges, you know what? This is probably one of the most dangerous pattern that I witness.
Right. How
we stop discussing, debating your ideas versus mine, because immediately saying, no, your ideas are so bad that we cannot even talk about it, right?
Yeah.
And so that's the warning I can do. That's a warning. There's so many red lights. We didn't have opportunity to talk about red lights that I see in America that are so resemblance of what I witness, and it's too many things that slowly this country is we're losing that freedom, unfortunately, and we have to fight it back for the freedom of this country.
You got it. Well, Ted, listen, thank you for telling your story to us. This is I hope everybody in America gets a chance to listen to this podcast because you talk about what a great blessing we have in America and how we have to defend that freedom and that liberty. That's what this podcast is all about. Thanks for telling your story. And, thanks for being such a great ambassador for America and for liberty and for freedom.
Thank you, Jeff. My privilege to be here, privilege to share. And certainly, yes, we are a blessed country and we have to defend that freedom every day. And it starts in our homes, it starts in our cities, and it starts in the country, right? Because nobody will defend it for us. We have to do it.
That's right. All right, Ted. Hey, thanks for joining us. I appreciate it. Listen, this is a great example. And I talk about it all the time. I love interviewing people who come to the United States as immigrants, who immigrate to the United States. They have such a wonderful story. It renews our bloodline, as I love to say. It reminds us of how special this country is and what a great place we live in, where freedom and opportunity abound. And we have to defend it, as Ted said. That's our job, to defend it for the next generation, our children, and for our grandchildren. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you for listening to American Potential. You may listen to more stories from Americans working every day to expand freedom and opportunity in their communities by visiting AmericanPotential.com.